trade unions could well be handed greater powers to strike if new government reforms go ahead under Angela Rayner. The repeal of existing laws would mean a majority would no longer be needed to support industrial action. That's something the Tories say would open the floodgates to even more strikes.
Well, since coming into power, Labour has been quick to try to settle public sector pay disputes, already agreeing to a raft of recommended pay rises, including an increase of around 22% for junior doctors over 2 years.
As we know, train drivers from aslef were handed an increase of more than 14% over 3 years. This year, armed forces personnel are going to get a 6% increase, and NHS staff and teachers have accepted 5.5%.
Civil servants will get 5% and police officers 4.7%.
And these increases, confirmed, of course, by the Chancellor, are estimated to be worth about 9.4 billion quid. However, a little less than 48 hours after the train drivers' union, aslef, agreed to a 14.25% pay increase, they then announced 3 more months of industrial action. Not about pay, though, about conditions. So has the government been a bit soft with the strikers?
Well, we're joined by a former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, James Schneider, who says disputes are being settled by a government willing to negotiate, and also former special advisor to Boris Johnson, Oscar Reddrop, who says the government are giving in too easily. Well, we know that you would say that, Oscar, wouldn't you? Because the government didn't give in at all. The last government didn't get round the table and people were fed up.
People were fed up, and I remember it very well. It was 2022, the summer of discontent. You know, Mitt Lynch was a, hugely powerful, persuasive speaker at the time. And polling amongst the public at that moment in time, they were very much on side with the strikers. However, 2 years have passed now, and I think that public opinion polling that you'll see, and it'd be nice to see some refreshed polling on it that comes out over the next few months, I think that has shifted and it has changed. I get what the Labour Party are doing now they're in government. They want to go, look how terrible the Tories were, nothing ever got solved, all the problems that we can just click our fingers and solve. But I really think there's a strategic naivety there.
Yeah,
because it's a domino effect.
There had to be a settlement, didn't there? I mean, the rail strikes have been going on and on and on. People were sick of them, commuters in particular, who need to use the trains all the time.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, even if they're on the right of the centre in terms of politics, wouldn't see basically 5% over 3 years, 5%, 5%, 5%. It's particularly excessive. They might see it as money well spent to kill the dispute.
Well, to kill the dispute for the time being, and that's the really crucial point. And the thing that is often forgotten, I think, when we talk about pay disputes, industrial action, is the millions of people who are sat around their breakfast tables right now watching this, who are not part of a union, who are just cracking on, trying to make the best of life as they can. And often they are completely removed from the conversation, and they are at the front line of the services that they often don't receive.
Are you arguing for union representation in all areas? Because it sounded a little bit like that was
no. I'm arguing for
James, let's come to you. Resolving strikes, the public, we know, wants, and got very cross that the Conservative Party didn't manage to do it. Labour's now in government. Why pick now to do this? Because isn't it playing into the hands of those who say Labour's in hock to the unions anyway, and all we're doing in Britain is playing into the hands of the strikers and being soft on them?
So these are all long-running pay disputes, and the pay bodies that come up which recommend how much pay should go up has come out with the recommendations. So now is the time to settle them rather than prolong industrial action. And what we're talking about here is issues that have been built up over 14 years of year-on-year pay cuts for nurses, for the armed forces, for doctors, for teachers.
Yeah, but Kate's question is, why repeal the 2016 Trade Union Act? What's the point?
Because it's a very strange piece of legislation which, for example, makes all trade unions have to have their elections by post. When it's 2024, we can do things online. It's a restrictive thing. Now, let's look...
Yeah, but it also... Hang on, you say it's very strange, and the postal thing is... I think that's a fair point. But it also says that you need at least 50% of the membership to take part in the poll. What's wrong with that?
So, again...
You know, poll for a strike.
It's made in a restrictive way because it's hard to get people to do postal voting in an age where it's online. If it were online with a threshold, then you could have an argument about it. Now, what is a strike? A strike is when ordinary people, workers, get together in their organisation, which is called a trade union, and they take the last step of action in a dispute. Because if we've seen with nurses and doctors, they've had massive pay cuts in real terms over the last 14 years. They're worried about safe staffing levels. There's a big retention crisis. And it's the last step that they can take to say, we can't put up with this anymore. And I agree with what Oscar said. Everybody should be able to be in a trade union. If you're sitting at home and watching this and go, I think a 5% pay rise would be reasonable. I've had year-on-year pay cuts every year. The answer to that is join a trade union. Find your fellow workers and join a union.
Because actually, the train drivers settled pay, that was important to them. But also, it's important for all of us who, for instance, use the network to have safety as a concern.
No, of course. And this will be the real test. And this is why I say strategically from the Labour Party, the Labour government at this moment in time, this could prove really challenging for them, because understandably 99% of the population at this moment in time will go, well, if they're getting the quid, you know, I want the pro here, you know, the T's and C's attached to it. Am I going to see a better service if we settle this dispute?
But so much of this is about perception, isn't it?
Skeptical.
I mean, there is a broad perception, not held by everybody, but certainly quite a large section of the press this morning, that what we're seeing here is payback, that the trade unions bankrolled over half of Labour MPs' campaigns in the last election, and this is now the back being scratched in return.
It's not surprising that the billionaire-owned media is opposed to workers getting a fair deal. I mean, again, what we've seen here is workers who've had year-on-year real-term pay cuts, which has been damaging to these services. If you look at staff morale levels and safe staffing levels in the NHS, those have all been hit by having a retention crisis and low staff morale. Paying people properly improves morale and will improve the service.
But to come back to the Trade Union Act, you made the point that the voting system and the restrictions on voting are a real issue. Well, why not just tinker with it? Why actually repeal the whole thing? Why not just tinker with the voting system to make the voting system easier for people to take part in?
So I don't think it should be made more difficult for workers to take action to defend themselves. Before 2015, before this act came in, it's not like there was a wave of these unreasonable strike actions. It should be made as, easy, relatively easy, for workers to come together and say, we don't like this harassment or this bullying or this underpaying, and we want to improve our pay and our conditions and, therefore, the service that we can provide to our customers or to citizens.
But there will be members of the public now who will see these stories and they will be concerned that, in effect, and I don't care really how you shake it, it will be easier to go on strike in this country. And that will make service users, understandably, wary and nervous of that.
But
maybe that's the plan of it. Maybe that's the plan of it.
We are where we are. We've got a Labour government now, and Labour and the unions, symbiotically, have always, from the very beginning, had a close relationship. It's just the reality of our politics.
And it's a balancing act, because I do think most, generally speaking, good, decent people want good, decent workers to be treated well, with dignity and respected at work. But I think over the next few months and years, we may see Labour tip that balance too far the other way.
We will see.
Well, we will see. Good to speak to both of you this morning.